Marriage. I'm getting married, thought Harrison Gates as he stood in front of the tall mirror in the corner of the dressing room, carefully adjusting his bow tie for what felt like the 100th time. The reflection that stared back at him was a mixture of nerves and excitement, wrapped in a crisp black tuxedo. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day he'd been dreaming about for years. Harrison Gates and his soon-to-be wife, Samantha Snow, had been together for just over 3 years. They had met in the most unexpected of places, a bookshop tucked away on a quiet street, both reaching for the same worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. What started as a conversation over coffee quickly turned into late-night phone calls, weekend getaways, and a love that had grown steady and strong. Samantha was everything Harrison had ever hoped for. Brilliant, kind, full of laughter and light. She made the world feel softer, more manageable. And now, surrounded by his groomsmen and the buzz of last-minute preparations, he was finally ready to make her his wife. He smiled at his reflection, tilting his head as he adjusted his tie again, wanting everything to be perfect for their big day. "Hey, man," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Harrison turned around, his face lighting up. Standing there with the same charming grin and easy confidence he'd always carried was Dylan Johnson, his best friend since childhood. They'd grown up together, side by side, through every milestone, though Dylan's free-spirited nature had taken him all over the world in recent years. "Hey," Harrison exclaimed, crossing the room with open arms. The two embraced briefly, clapping each other on the back. "Where have you been?" Harrison asked, pulling away with a grin. "You know me," Dylan said with a shrug, hands in his pockets. "Never in one place for too long." "Well, I'm glad you could make it," Harrison said, returning to the mirror, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Dylan replied, though there was a heaviness behind his voice. A pause lingered in the air. Harrison glanced at him through the mirror. "I'm sensing there's a but following that statement." Dylan hesitated, eyes drifting to the floor. He bit his lip, gathering his thoughts before finally looking up, his expression serious. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, meeting Harrison's eyes in the reflection. Harrison turned around slowly, brows furrowed. "Why wouldn't I be?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't know," Dylan said with a shrug, his voice light but laced with something heavier underneath. "You're just so young, Harrison. There's so much world to see, so many experiences you haven't had yet." Harrison cut him off, his voice firm but calm. "Yes, there is a lot of world to see," he said, "but I want to see it with Sammy." Dylan paused, searching Harrison's face for something he couldn't seem to find. Then he nodded slowly, as if resigning himself to an unspoken truth. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing faintly in the quiet room. Weird, Harrison thought, watching him go. He sat down on the edge of the sleek leather couch, the tuxedo feeling a little tighter around his chest than it had a moment ago. Reaching for his phone, he unlocked it and stared at the background photo, him and Samantha on a beach in Santorini, laughing, wind in her hair, pure joy frozen in time. His heart softened and he smiled. Dylan had always liked Samantha. Maybe too much. But he'd never said anything, at least not outright. Still, something about the way he'd looked at Harrison just now, like he was about to say something but couldn't bring himself to do it. It sat uncomfortably in the back of Harrison's mind. Trying to shake it, he typed out a quick message. "I love you, beautiful. Can't wait for you to be Mrs. Gates. Send." He watched as the typing bubbles appeared on the screen, his heart fluttering just a little, and then they disappeared. Nothing. He wasn't worried. Not really. He knew some brides had little superstitions about talking to the groom before the ceremony. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe her hands were full with makeup or hair or whatever brides did. Shrugging it off, Harrison reached for the chilled bottle of champagne sitting on the small table beside him and poured himself a glass. He took a long sip, letting the bubbles fizzle on his tongue, then leaned back and tried to let the silence calm him. But Dylan's words lingered like a whisper in the corners of his mind. The soft click of heels on the polished floor pulled Harrison from his thoughts. A moment later, the door creaked open and his mother, Evelyn Gates, stepped into the room, radiating elegance in a navy blue dress that shimmered slightly beneath the light. Her eyes sparkled as they landed on her son. There's my handsome groom," she beamed, clapping her hands together. "Oh, Harrison, you look perfect." He stood up as she came over and wrapped him in a warm, familiar hug. She smelled like lavender and the faintest hint of vanilla home. "Thanks, Mom," he said with a smile, pulling back to look at her. "You look amazing." "Oh, stop," she said with a mock wave of her hand. "This isn't about me. It's your day, your moment." She took a step back, her hands fluttering to his shoulders, brushing away invisible dust. "Can you believe it? My baby boy's getting married." He laughed softly. "Yeah, it feels kind of surreal." She smiled at him, but there was something just slightly off in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation. Her hands stilled on his lapels. "Sweetheart," she began gently, "can I ask you something?" Harrison raised an eyebrow, the champagne glass still in his hand. Sure. She took a small breath, then stepped back. Are you? Are you absolutely sure this is what you want? He blinked, caught off guard. What? I don't mean that I don't love Samantha. I do, she said quickly, hands up in defense. She's wonderful, really. It's just... Her voice softened. Marriage is a big step, Harrison. And once you take it, there's no going back. I just want to make sure you're not feeling rushed or pressured or anything. He stared at her, brow furrowed. Mom, where's this coming from? She hesitated, then shook her head. Nowhere. Ignore me. Just nerves, I guess. You know how emotional moms get on days like this? He didn't respond right away. He just studied her. His mother, always steady, always sure. And for the first time in a long while, he saw something uncertain in her expression. I love her, he said finally firmly. There's no doubt in my mind. Evelyn smiled again, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Then that's all that matters, she said, brushing his cheek lightly before turning for the door. I'll go check on the others. Ceremony's in less than an hour. Okay, Harrison said, watching her go. As the door clicked shut behind her, he sat back down slowly. First Dylan. Now, Mom. He glanced at his phone again. Still no reply from Samantha. Something was off, and for the first time all day, Harrison wasn't sure it was just nerves. Hey, what is all of this about? Do they all know something I don't? The thought gnawed at Harrison as he stood there alone in the quiet room. The wedding was set to begin in just 15 minutes. Tick, tick, tick. The old clock on the wall echoed through the silence like a metronome counting down to something. He wasn't sure what. Everything felt off. Too quiet. Unnaturally quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't calming, it was ominous. Taking a deep breath, Harrison straightened his jacket, squared his shoulders, and whispered to himself, Here goes nothing. He stepped out of the room and into the chapel, where soft candlelight flickered along the walls, and guests turned in their seats to watch him take his place at the altar. Dylan walked beside him, quiet and unreadable, as he took his position as groomsman. Harrison smiled. But something caught his attention. Something in the air, or maybe in the expressions around him. He scanned the room. Faces. So many familiar faces. But not a single one looked at peace. They didn't look joyful or excited, not like you'd expect at a wedding. They looked somber, concerned. A few were even crying quietly. One woman near the front clutched a tissue to her mouth like she was holding back a scream. Another older man seemed frozen in place, eyes wide with what looked like regret. Some people looked like they wanted to stand up, like they wanted to stop something. What the hell is going on? Harrison whispered under his breath, his heart beginning to pound in his chest. And then the music started. Here Comes the Bride echoed softly through the chapel, delicate and dreamlike. Harrison took a deep breath and stood tall, steadying himself. Here lies my forever, he thought, a wave of emotion washing over him. Tears blurred his vision as his veiled bride, his Samantha, began to walk down the aisle. She looked radiant, gliding toward him in her white gown. He smiled through the tears. Everything else faded. She reached him at the altar, and he gently took her hands in his. He mouthed, I love you, his voice too choked to speak aloud. But there was no reply, no smile, no squeeze of his hand, nothing, just silence from the veiled Samantha. As the priest stepped forward and the guests slowly took their seats, an unbearable tension filled the chapel. Then, without warning, Dylan lunged. From beside him, he rushed forward with terrifying speed and thrust a dagger into Samantha's neck. No! Harrison screamed, catching her as she collapsed forward into his arms. Tears poured down his face as he cradled her, his heart shattering in real time. Shaking, he reached for her veil, yanked it back, and stumbled backward in horror. Her face. It was her, but not. Her skin was gray and decaying, eyes clouded and lifeless. A corpse. Samantha's corpse. Harrison doubled over, clutching his stomach and vomiting violently, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. What is this? He gasped. Dylan stepped forward, grabbing Harrison by the shoulders, shaking him hard. She's dead, Harrison, Dylan shouted. She's been dead for 3 years. Wake up! The chapel around them blurred. The walls pulsed. The air shimmered like heat waves. And then everything shattered. Harrison gasped as he opened his eyes, blinking rapidly against the harsh white lights above him. His body trembled. His chest heaved. He was no longer in the chapel. He was in a sterile, cold room surrounded by familiar faces. Family, friends, and doctors. Some were crying. Some looked stunned. A voice broke through the chaos. What happened? Harrison croaked, wiping the tears from his face with a shaky hand. That's Samantha, Dylan began softly. His voice cracked and he had to pause, gathering the strength to go on. Samantha died, Harrison. She died 3 years ago. It was a car accident. On your wedding day. Harrison stared at him, the words hitting like bricks. You've been here at Realiplex, the virtual reality memory facility, Dylan continued, kneeling down beside the hospital bed. You came here after she died, hoping to relive your time with her. To be with her again. There was a long silence before Dylan spoke again, this time even more gently. What we didn't know until recently is that once the simulation reaches the final real memory, when there's nothing left to simulate, your brain doesn't let go. It believes the world it's in is still real, and it locks itself inside. You fall into a kind of coma, mentally trapped. He took a breath. We tried everything. We tried pulling you out 100 different ways. We waited, hoping you'd wake up on your own. Nothing worked, until now. Dylan's voice trembled slightly. We had to shock your mind so deeply, create such a contradiction to what your brain thought it remembered, that the disturbance woke you up. Your mind remembered the real ending, how she died, and what you saw in there wasn't it. That mismatch forced your consciousness to reject the simulation. Harrison sat there stunned. Grief flooded him all over again as he realized it was true. He had lost her, and he had just said goodbye all over again.